Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for attending the Oracle Integration webinar. Thanks for joining our quarterly webcast. I'm Jürgen Kress, your host, part of the Oracle product management team. In case you missed one of our webcasts, on-demand recordings are available at the Oracle Video Hub, including presentations for download. In today's presentation, Abhi Kumar, Deepak Arora, and Neil Kominsky will present an Oracle integration update and discuss best practices. Objective of the call is to give you an update on Oracle integration. SaaS solutions like HCM, CX, and ERP Cloud need to be integrated and customized. Pre-built integration adapters accelerate your SaaS implementation and reduce project risk. Abhi Kumar best practice presentation to connect ERP and supply chain highlights integration patterns and extension patterns. Quick housekeeping. Today's session is live and the presentation is being recorded. Please feel free to post your questions via the conference Q&A tool in the Zoom console. At the end of the webcast, we will answer your questions. Slides and on-demand webcast will be posted at the Oracle Video Hub at bit.ly/watchORC. We will post announcements and links in the conference chat. Please complete the online survey at the end of the webinar. As we will present product roadmap information, please pay attention to the Oracle Safe Harbor statement. Please do tweet and blog about products and services which are available today. For today's agenda, followed by the latest announcements, Neil will highlight the Oracle Integration August release, including a live demo. Abhi Kumar and Deepak Arora will discuss best practices, and we will wrap up the session with questions and answers. So let's get started. Thanks for your Gartner Peer Insight reviews. Oracle integration is rated 4.4 out of 5 stars. Use the documentation and training material to become an integration expert. For business users, developers, and admins, we offer training material. For example, introduction to Oracle integration, basic competencies for developers, and business patterns. Oracle integration is part of the free trial program. Build, test, deploy Oracle integration, and connect your applications. The trial is valid for up to 30 days. Who are the integration experts who can support your project? To find a local system integrator, you can visit Partner Finder. There you can search for any Oracle product, including Oracle integration and SOA Suite on premises. You can also search for your local partner by region and by certification. At Oracle Cloud Marketplace, you can look up any partners and applications built for the Oracle Cloud Platform. For example, third-party adapters from Avanco to connect SAP or Amazon, or pre-built recipes from Buzzware. You want to collaborate? Visit Oracle Cloud Customer Connect. Ask your questions, get updates, share your success and best practices. Today's session is recorded and will be available on demand. In case you missed one of our webcasts, please visit the Oracle Video Hub integration channel. For the latest product updates, please subscribe to our quarterly newsletter. The product management team keeps you updated with the latest events, success stories, white papers, and trainings. Please subscribe at bit.ly/OIC newsletter and read the latest summer edition 2021. With this brief introduction, I would like to hand over to Neil Kominsky.
Welcome everybody from a rainy Bavaria. I hope the sun is shining where you are. But without further ado, let's get in and see what we have added to the August release of OIC. August release 21.3.2. All of you have been upgraded to this release. Next release that we have is November and of course February 22 then. Now, if we look at the product focus areas, these areas are always the same. Developer productivity. Now, OIC is a very intuitive, productive tool, but we are adding more value add there to make it even more productive for you folks. Pre-built connectivity. Here we're looking at our rich set of adapters, allowing you to connect to Oracle and non-Oracle SaaS and on-premise apps and technologies. The whole area of our operations, reliability and scalability, what you would expect from an enterprise integration platform. And the real-time visibility, here we're looking at the new features that we have in Integration Insight. So within developer productivity, we have embedded the Oracle Assistant within OIC. Now, many of you folks might have seen this already. I'll just show it to you now here. So I'm back into my, let's go in here to this environment and have a quick look at this. Down at the bottom here, we see we have this Oracle Assistant. So of course, the whole idea with the Oracle Assistant is, you know, to ask them questions. Now I ask questions like this, and of course they don't come up with a satisfactory answer. Yeah, but if I do ask some other questions here, for example, how do we import employees? Now you could well imagine somebody starting off with OIC needs to import employees from some source system into HCM. So of course the assistant chatbot tells us, sure, yeah, where do you want to import from? So if I click, for example, eBusiness Suite here, it's going to give me links to documentation where I can find out exactly how to do that at the eBusiness Suite level, and of course at the HCM level as well. So of course, I've got a couple of other questions here. For example, how do I connect to hybrid systems? Somebody who needs to connect to on-premise applications or technologies. And then, of course, it's telling us use the connectivity agent. And of course, then it's pointing us directly to the documentation for that. So this is a very, very nice addition to our toolkit here. And of course, when you have something like this, yeah, I'm asking relatively basic style questions here, you know, how do I add conditional logic and so on. So for newbies, this is very, very interesting. But you can imagine the sky is really the limit here. Like with this chat functionality here, you know, in the future, maybe we could create connections to your SaaS apps via chat and that sort of stuff there. So just look at this as the first iteration, so to speak. You know, it's a self-learning system, so we get better and better over time. I'd ask you, please try it out. And if you don't get satisfactory answers, you will be able to notify it. It'll ask you for some feedback there. Well, why use a conversational assistant? As I say, to get instant answers. It makes it much quicker than having to go in and Google whatever you need to do. And again, as I mentioned, continuous improvement. The assistant is learning, is getting better with each user interactions. And of course, it is a foundation for future automation. Again, an example, maybe using a chat to configure a connection and integration. So the sky's the limit in this respect. So in respect of pre-built connectivity, we've got two new adapters. We've got the SAP S/4HANA adapter and the Zendesk adapters. And then we've added new features to many adapters as well. Now, a couple of the ones that we'll be highlighting today are, for example, the Salesforce platform event support. Also, we'll be looking at, okay, see Marketo here, custom objects now support. We see for eBusiness Suite support for business service objects, etc., etc. And going in here to look at the actual Zendesk adapter, you know, a powerful and flexible customer service solution. You know, that is what Zendesk is. And what does this allow us to do? For example, perform, create, update, delete, and query operations on Zendesk exposed business resources, for example, create tickets, update tickets, close tickets, etc., etc. So one of the use cases, of course, here that we can use along with the platform event support in Salesforce is a platform event in Salesforce, for example, case has been opened, that would fire an integration that would create the relevant ticket in Zendesk. So with the SAP S/4HANA adapter, okay, what is SAP S/4HANA? Okay, cloud-based ERP solutions for large enterprises. And then you see the support that we're providing here to execute the OData APIs, support for create, retrieve, update, and delete against the modules through invoke patterns, for creating new items in the collection. And typical use cases could be, you know, opportunity to cache from some front-end shop, like maybe Shopify or Oracle Commerce Cloud to S/4HANA, or, you know, supplier sync between S4 and Oracle ERP. So again, mentioning the Salesforce platform events support. So platform events configured at salesforce.com can be then selected within the wizard here. So we've augmented the Salesforce adapter with the following: support for platform events. You select this, and then you go in and you say, which event are you interested in? For example, case escalated. And when the case has been escalated, let's create a ticket in Zendesk. And that's just kind of a pattern showing you how that happens. So the platform event occurs in Salesforce. We have registered for that event. So OIC is subscribing to that event, gets that event, receives it, and takes the necessary action, in this case, creating a ticket via the new Zendesk adapter. We've also got a lot of new functionality in respect of Integration Insight. Now, Integration Insight is a key component of Oracle Integration Cloud, and we're making it even easier for you to get those business user dashboard metrics out of your integrations and processes. And we've made some nice UI additions here, or enhancements in respect of the progress tracker. So here we see the different milestones that can be reached within a particular business process. And the default visualization of this process tracker has been modified to render only the milestones that have been passed. So for example, instead of you seeing everything here, you only see the salient ones. Now, this is a choice you can make. And for in-flight transactions, the milestones not passed are rendered gray in color. And the error milestones, which were previously always listed, are only shown when an error actually occurs. So it's just reflecting more exactly what's happening within that business transaction there. And of course, when embedding the process tracker in other apps, you can further customize the visualization to show skip milestones, exclude certain milestones as well. So this is another very important feature within Insight, is the fact that you don't have to use OIC as the user interface for Insight. You can embed it in your tool of choice. Like, for example, if you've got many integrations relation to Fusion ERP or Fusion HCM, you could render the Insight dashboards in Fusion ERP or in Fusion HCM, so that the business user stays within the tool that they know and use daily. Other things that we've done with Insight as well is in respect of mapping the Insight model to the integration action, so to speak. Previously, that was done outside of the integration. Now you can do it inline as well. Now, it's a small step, but it does make it much easier for you to map. So within the integration itself, you can map to your Insight model, as opposed to having previously to exit the integration and do it outside there. And of course, we've made it easier, like to switch between progress tracker and transaction detail view. So we've got this high level tracker. And of course, just by one click here, you can have a different view of it. Now, and of course, in this instance here, we see all of the milestones have occurred around the same time. But you could imagine if you have a business process with complex approvals, those milestones would be reached at, it would be much more staggered here in the rendering that you would see here. So it's just giving you the option to easily go from one to the other. Now, operations, being able to put activity stream logs to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure logging. Now, this is a huge value add as well. Now, many people, when they look at OIC and we see the monitoring within OIC, it is very comprehensive. But it does have some limitations. For example, if you've got two OIC environments, you see the information or the monitoring information for each in each separate instance. There's no common view of what's going on in your multiple OIC instances. Now, one way that we can actually do that now is by sending the activity stream log data to the OCI logging service. And then from the OCI logging service, we can send it on to Log Analytics. Now, I'll just give you a simple example, or just a simple view of what that can actually look like. So now if I go in here to my dashboards here, now this is something I've created in Logging Analytics. The information here is I've got 2 OIC instances. One's in London, one's in Phoenix. And I don't want to go into both. I have to go into both of those to see what's going on. So I have this dashboard here, this global dashboard showing me, the state of health in London and in Phoenix. Everything is up and running. I get top level message metrics here, how many messages received, messages successful count, fail count, etc. And what I've also added is some basic stuff here like the connection agent status. So these are the sort of information that you don't maybe get out of the box within OIC itself, especially not over multiple instances. But it was very, very easy for me to create such. Now, I apologize that I haven't put in nice labels here, but I'm sure you get the idea here. I can also go in here and have tests on my connections to show the status of my connections. So you see all of my OIC connections seem to be okay at the moment, except for my Box connection here, and my Commerce Cloud connection here. And then I can go down here and I can see, okay, count by integration. What are my most top integrations? And this again is over the 2 instances, the one in London and the one in Phoenix. So you can see what's going on here. I can see which, the message count per instance. So I see that my PM one here, which is the Phoenix one, has 61% of the workload and 38% is in the UK. Then I can do this, count by errors. And here I'm actually showing information, payload information. So I've got an ordering system where I can order drinks, and you can see here different drinks here that have been ordered. And this is really kind of from a payload in your integration, surfacing this information as well. So the net here is that using or pushing your activity stream log information to OCI logging and then on to logging analytics can allow you to have these sort of metrics, these kind of system style metrics. Is the environment up and running? Yes. The top level metrics, receives, successful, etc. The state of my connectivity agents, the status of my connections. But I can also have things in there like business relevant information. I can also then have dashboards on particular adapter usage. Okay, for the FTP adapter, and I say, okay, there's no data to display for AS2 at the moment, for example. Now that's just giving you a very, this is a very basic thing what I put together here now, but it does open up a whole new area for you folks here in respect of monitoring. And I'll give you some links at the end here to see exactly how to set that up. So some other operations enhancements is, okay, email enhancements, limit for the number of emails sent from Oracle integration. And this is to make sure that there's a capacity available for all customers and can be increased by request. Now, this is just going again into the blog post I was mentioning here. Overall, about the August 21 released, great blog post from Anthony here. For the OCI logging, I've got about 4 different posts describing how to do what I just showed you there as well. Post on how to use the Zendesk adapter, another post on the Oracle Assistant. And then my colleague here has a great post on the Inside Process Tracker and the other changes that have been made for Inside. So that was the August release. And I've gone through it quickly, and I know that. And the reason I'm doing that is to make or to give enough time to Deepak and Abe to go through best practices for using OIC with Oracle ERP. And I think this is very, very important that we get to the stage where if we're not just talking about the features, we're not just talking the product can do A, B, C, and D, that level deeper in how to use it intelligently and productively to make sure you get the most out of it. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Abe. Are you ready?
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Jürgen, for giving us this opportunity. So when it comes to Oracle ERP and SCM, integration and extensions are common themes. Integration, in my opinion, is a no-brainer because integration is needed in probably any application implementation, and Oracle ERP SCM is no exception. That's because you have to protect your existing investments in terms of you might already have applications, home-built applications, COTS kind of applications like Salesforce, Workday, SAP, and you might want to get the data back and forth between these applications into and out of Oracle ERP and SCM. Extension may be a little newer concept, but extension provides the ability to have features on Oracle ERP and SCM, which are not really provided out of the box. Think about a use case like, let's say you are a big retailer and you are getting like invoices from your suppliers on an email as an attachment. And you would want to provide an ability for your user to collate those invoices, zip it up, and you want to provide him or her a screen to upload that particular zip file. An extension is a super use case. Or think about a scenario where you want to build a lightweight order entry system where people want to go and enter an order, look up items and search for inventory availability and get the pricing and costing before submitting the order. That could be an extension scenario. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. So we are going to talk about some best practices and design patterns to integrate and extend Oracle ERP and SCM today. My name is Abhay Kumar, and I'm from Oracle A-Team. A quick review on who we are. A-Team, we are a customer-facing, highly technical team with an Oracle product development that's comprised of enterprise architects, solution specialists, and software engineers. We work very closely with customers like yourself and partners, providing guidance and troubleshooting and best practices. And I put a link on our blog. If you have not visited this, I highly recommend. There is a lot of good content out there. So the agenda for today, I plan to cover a very brief introduction in terms of the topology of Fusion, because when we talk about Oracle ERP and SCM is a broad bucket. So I want to call out some nitty-gritties there so everybody understands what we are talking in terms of best practices. We'll talk about the capabilities offered by Oracle Fusion to integrate and extend this application, but also we are going to talk about capabilities of Oracle OIC, which could help integrate and extend. We are going to talk about some integration patterns, and finally we are going to talk about some extension patterns. Hopefully, at the end of this meeting, hopefully every one of you will have some key takeaways. So with that said, so when we look at the landscape of ERP and SCM, it is it's a combination of multiple applications. So, but we generally and probably very broadly use it as Oracle ERP and SCM, but it's a big ecosystem out there. So when you look at ERP, you have financials, procurement, project management, enterprise performance management, enterprise data management. When it comes to supply chain, you have product lifecycle management, supply chain planning, procurement, order management, manufacturing, warehouse management, logistics, and so on. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this, and some of you may already be aware, is when we talk about Oracle ERP and SCM, and mainly focused for this presentation, we'll be talking about what we call as a Fusion application suite. And the majority of this application belongs to Fusion application suite, but there are few, like what I call it out here, they are non-Fusion apps. What I mean to say is they are not built on the same framework and platforms. So when we talk about best practices here, we are, the main focus is Fusion, which is essentially like a 600-pound gorilla. And then you have like the satellite applications, which are not built on the same framework, but you could still extend and integrate them, but they have their own nuances, to integrate and extend them. So, and I want to call it out so that you are aware that we are focused on the Fusion applications for this presentation. Now, so with that said, so let's drill right into the capabilities, what the application offers and what OIC has to offer to actually integrate and extend Fusion. So let's talk about Oracle Fusion and ERP connectivity capability. So broadly, I can think of the capabilities offered as inbound connect and outbound connect. And when I say inbound connect, it is getting transactions and data into ERP and SCM cloud. And what are the capabilities offered there? So the first thing is FBDI. FBDI stands for file-based data import. It's used mainly for batch-based integrations. You can send in files in a particular flat file format, either hosting that on UCM, or you can host it on SFTP servers as well, and then use OIC to pick it up and then host it on UCM. And then you can also send it through MTOM if necessary, if there are like larger attachments. The second capability is SOAP and REST web services. Like any other modern cloud-based applications, ERP and SCM is a no exception. They provide a whole suite of REST and SOAP web services for you to connect, for more in real time. And then you have collaboration message framework. It is mainly used for B2B. That's if you had like an EDI document coming in or in more like an OASIS format, that's when you will be using CMK. The second set of capabilities is more like outbound connect, that is getting the data out of Oracle ERP and SCM. Maybe you wanted your item master, if Fusion was an item master, you want to get the data out and sync it to your other applications. So that is when you would use this outbound capabilities. And in the capabilities, what Fusion offers are events. Events are published whenever something has something happens on Fusion. Let's say when the sales order gets created, that's when an event is right. There is public documentation out there wherein it lists all the events which are supported by Fusion. I want to call it out that while Fusion strives hard to provide events for majority of the business objects and events, it still falls short of some events. So in that case, how do you extract data out? So that comes to the second point of using these tools called as BI Publisher, BIP in short, and BICC. So BI Publisher allows you to write queries against the tables, the raw tables against Fusion and extract data out. BICC is more used for extracts, like if you really want to extract the data out of ERP and host it in a data lake, that's when BICC comes into picture. And the CMK is applicable for outbound connect as well. So now let's look into the capabilities of Oracle integration. So now with Oracle ERP and SCM offering these capabilities, what would OIC offer to actually connect to Oracle ERP and SCM? One of the first things which rings in mind for especially ERP and SCM, because these are more batch-based, especially if you go into the financial world wherein you have to import like huge ledgers or multiple, thousands of invoices. You need something for large file handling, right? So I have seen customers import like a 400 meg general ledger data into ERP Cloud through OIC. So one of the capabilities what OIC offers is to handle large files. So OIC can handle files up to 1 gig. If it is more than 1 gig, we generally recommend, I've never seen customers go beyond 1 gig, but if you are one that if you are thinking that you might have 1 gig, we would highly recommend to split those files up, which should be fairly easy. So OIC offers what we call as a map reduce patterns, which will help you process these huge files in chunk or read these files in chunk. So that is the chunking feature. This chunking feature has various features inbuilt to it, which is not really exposed to the developer or the user. It has parallelism. It inherently can process multiple chunks at time. You can set the record size. So that is one of the coolest functionality what OIC offers to actually integrate to ERP and SCM. The second one is the ability to call the REST and the SOAP web services hosted on ERP. So as everybody probably might know, OIC offers REST and SOAP adapters, and also it supports token-based authentication. The third one, probably one of the most important ones, is the ERP adapter itself. So ERP adapter is specifically meant for connecting to Oracle Fusion ERP and SCM. And I don't think there is anybody else other than Oracle who offers a capability to connect natively to Oracle ERP and SCM. So what does Oracle ERP adapter do is it gives you a simplified one-step process to import FBDI files into ERP. So the FBDI import process itself is a multi-step process. Basically, you have to A, create an FBDI file, B, put that on a UCM, and 3, you have to run an import job to import it. So what ERP Adapter does is it combines all these 3 and gives you a very simplified approach to actually get the FBDI files into an inbound integration into ERP and SCM in one step. The second thing is you can subscribe to events. This was an outbound capability, what I talked about. You can also do callback configurations. That is essentially like when you send in, let's say, a large GL import, you might want to see, like, whether your GL got processed or not. So what you could do is you can listen to a callback coming from ERP and SCM and listen on OIC and say, okay, I got the callback and pretty much determine whether how successful was your GL import? Did any records error out? And the last one is the token-based auth. I mean, in this modern age of security-conscious customer and security breaches, one of the things what we highly recommend as a best practice is to use token-based auth. But many customers out there simply just to cut the corners or reduce the complexity, they start using basic auth, which is probably keeping your doors open for security risk. So ERP Adapter does support token-based auth connecting to Fusion, so that's one other feature what you might want to keep in mind. And the last feature on the last capability for OIC is a file server. Why do we need file server? So let's say you're integrating with a third-party app, and the third-party app is generating thousands of orders in a file. The third-party app doesn't have any place to put that file, right? So you would probably need a placeholder to where you can get the file, so you can process that file and put that into ERP and SCM. So where do you do it? Generally, in the past, what customers implemented was they implemented their own SFTP servers. It could be an SFTP server hosted on Oracle Cloud, or they would probably use their on-prem SFTP server. But guess what? Now, I think it's been a while since the OIC SFTP server is built into OIC, and you can make use of this SFTP server to host files coming out of third-party applications and even the files coming out of Oracle ERP and SCM. So, and this would be, this is built into OIC, so there is no additional cost. So that would be another very cool feature what is used in the ERP and SCM integration. Now, so with that, we'll talk about the meat of this conversation, which is essentially the integration patterns. So I want to just call out a reference architecture because this is probably by most commonly used reference architecture when you are integrating with Oracle ERP. So on the left side, on the left side, you can see you have your third-party applications, cloud-based applications. It could be your FTP servers or on-prem systems that can connect to your Oracle integrations through cloud-to-cloud integrations through HTTP. And then if it's an on-prem, you could use OIC agents to connect to your on-prem systems. And then on the right-hand side, you have the Oracle Cloud ERP where OIC can connect to the Oracle ERP and SCM Cloud using the capabilities what I talked about in terms of FBDI, REST SOAP APIs, and Atom Feed is most commonly in SCM. It's not applicable for ERP and SCM, and the BIP extracts what you're getting data out. But you can also see a DBAS or ATP or the DB system in the middle. That is also quite a common pattern. I mean, you don't have to have a database in the middle, but there are a lot of scenarios where it makes sense. Like, for example, if you want to, do like an ordering of your messages, then a database in the middle makes sense. If you want to store your transient data and show it as reports, or if you wanted to do some error handling of your functional data, that's when all the DB in the middle makes sense, and that is an okay pattern to implement. Now, the first pattern what I want to talk about is an inbound pattern, which is FBDI. So you have your source applications on your left side, and you have your ERP and SCM Cloud on your right side, and Oracle integration in the middle. So the inbound pattern of FBDI is pretty simple. Your your source systems can generate a file. So if it generates a file, your Oracle integration cloud can consume the file. If it is larger than 10 MB, you would probably be using the chunking pattern, what we were discussing as a capability. You would enrich, you would transform, you would upload the file into UCM and initiate the ESS job. The upload file and the initiate ESS job is all handled by the ERP adapter that I talked about. And then what you can do is once it's uploaded, you can actually have a callback coming into Oracle integration, and then you could examine the callback and send notifications, or you can drill down into data and then put it into like a dashboard for users to consume and whatever, right? So this is the inbound pattern, and this is the file-based data import pattern. The key takeaways for this is it's a batch pattern. So use FBDI for batch-based integrations. It's a very, very common integration pattern, what we have seen in the ERP and SCM world. And always remember, batch in, batch out. So what it means to say is if your source system is generating a file, then you always, or most likely, you would use an FBDI approach. The reason is we don't want to, and we have seen some anti-patterns with customers and partners implementing, getting a batch file and then looping through individual records in the file and then calling REST APIs on ERP and SCM. There can be exceptions, but generally that mostly qualifies as an anti-pattern. Okay, so always remember, if you have a source file generating a batch pattern, it's generating a file, you most probably would likely to use FBDI to get the data into Oracle ERP. The second key takeaway is the ERP adapter. So use the capabilities of ERP adapter to simplify FBDI import and callback. Use the token-based authentication feature in ERP to send JOT tokens instead of basic auth as a security measure to interact with Fusion. And the third one is the callbacks. FBDI imports have asynchronous callbacks to monitor for the status of report. The second pattern is the real-time sync. The real-time sync is like, let's say you have, an extension which is designed, and you have like a physical user on the extension who is, let's say, querying for an order status. So this is a good scenario where FBDI would not fit in. This is the place where you would like to invoke a web service or a REST API to get the status out and immediately get the response back to the customer, to the user, right? And this is where you would probably end up using this real-time sync pattern, the inbound real-time, wherein you will use the REST API. You can still use the ERP adapter to invoke the REST APIs on Fusion, or you can also choose to use the native REST and SOAP adapters, but you have a choice. So the key takeaways for the real-time sync pattern is the real-time integrations can be implemented synchronously and asynchronously. And this is a common design decision what one has to make. And we have seen customers and partners do scenarios which were more asynchronous and implemented as synchronous and run into like hot water, just because the thought needs to be put in right at the design phase how you would like to build this real-time integration, right? So if you ask me, what would be how do you quantify or qualify a synchronous integration? I would say a synchronous integration is typically written within few seconds, not tens of seconds, few seconds, right? So generally that would be the qualifier. So if anything which is taking in few tens of seconds, you would definitely want to think through and make a design decision whether it could be redesigned more asynchronous. So the other key takeaway is the APIs. So as many of you know, and I talked about the capabilities of Oracle Fusion, it offers both SOAP and REST. Choose REST over SOAP, because SOAP was initially was there, and then we have been introducing more and more REST based services on Fusion, and in a longer run, the investment is only on REST, not on SOAP. SOAP will still be there, but eventually in the far distant future, it will be deprecated. REST APIs are growing in number, release after release. And REST APIs in Fusion has a framework called batch action. This can be used if you want to send multiple records in one shot. Let's say you had a shipment confirmation coming, and you had like 100 shipment confirmation coming. One way to do it is you can call the shipment confirmation APIs 100 times, as against you can pretty much batch this up in a single payload and call the shipment confirmation API once. So that is the batch action. So that can be made use if you had like multiple records coming in and if you want to send in multiple records. Use pagination when data retrieved is larger than 10 MB. OIC being in middle layer, we do today cap the messages coming in and out of OIC at 10 meg. And this should not be an issue because you have features like on Fusion where you can do pagination. So if you are thinking your response payload of number of orders is exceeding 10 MB, yeah, you don't have to retrieve that payload as a whole, but you can use the pagination features to retrieve like 4 MB data at a time, or 5 MB or 9 MB data at a time, and still manage to consume that in OIC. The other way of doing that, if it is really a huge file, then probably it's not a real-time scenario, so you have to go back to the FBDI approach that I talked about. Now let's jump on to the outbound patterns. In the outbound patterns, we have one of the main capabilities, what we talked about from ERP and SCM perspective, is generating the business events. So you could generate a business event that could be consumed by Oracle Integration Cloud, and then an event is just like you would get like a business identifier. So you can go back to Oracle ERP and SCM, use a REST API, query for the business identifier, get the payload, and then send it to the downstream system, right? The key takeaways here are events today, as it stands, can only be consumed with OIC, and that's why OIC stands out. So you cannot use the Fusion events with any other different technology or any other different product other than OIC. That's of today. It could change tomorrow. Events make use of something called event handling framework. It does expose some APIs where you can actually monitor, what are the events queued up. Not all business events are supported today through the event handling framework. And I was mentioning that, if you don't, if the business object doesn't support the events, then you have to think about a different approach in terms of BIP or BICC, which I'm going to talk about next. If there are no events, then you, like I said, you use the BIP or BICC. So the fourth pattern here is the BI publisher or the BICC, and this is mainly for extracting the data out of ERP. And this, we highly recommend this if there are no events and if there are no REST APIs to query for to retrieve the data. So this should be sparsely used, should not be used as a main pattern. I have seen customers and partners implement BIP as the main approach. This is again qualifies as an anti-pattern. You have to first make a determination if you have an event and the API is available to get the data out. If you don't have the data, if you don't have those APIs available, then you could use the BIP or BICC. So the way this works is the BIP can generate an extract. You can consume the extract as a file in Oracle Integration Cloud, transform it, and then send it to the downstream systems. So I called some of these things out, use BIP only when REST and SOAP are not available. I've also seen run reports being used in high volume transaction. Run report is a way you can go and run a report on the BIP server and then get a data out. And as it says, the call is running a report. So you shouldn't, and I've seen customers use this in more real-time scenarios and wonder why their integration performs so poorly, right? So this you have to think about designing this more in a way to extract data using REST APIs rather than running reports. And you always use BIP reports in asynchronous patterns rather than synchronous patterns. And if you have to make an exception, please document it, because you got to know why you probably use a BIP scenario in a synchronous scenario. So with that, I want to, I have a small cheat sheet, right? So like, if you had particular scenarios, what would you use? Like, for example, a journal import from external systems, it's a no-brainer. You probably use FBDI. If you want to create AP invoices from a file, you use FBDI. But if you want to create AP invoice import one at a time, somebody is generating one invoice at a time, then feel free to use REST API, right? If you want to do like supplier record inquiry, you can use supplier REST APIs, but you could also use the IP extract. So if you want to send out receivable invoice payments out, then you could use business events. So this cheat sheet is not elaborate. It's just calling a few examples out here. A few other noteworthy patterns to call out is a parking lot pattern. What we have seen, this is used when you have a fast publisher and a slow consumer, and you could see a database in the middle, you could use data, to host the data in database because you have a fast producer, so you can consume the publisher through OIC, and OIC can dump the data into database, and then you could have one more subscription from OIC to pick up the data and send it to Fusion. The other pattern, what we have commonly come across, is a scheduler integration pattern. There are two patterns here. One, we call it a scheduler chaining. This is like, if you have a parent schedule job and a child schedule job, which are consuming their independent files, but then maybe from a parent schedule job, when you consume the file, you would like to invoke the child job to pick up the file in where the child consumes the data out, directly the child consumes data out. So OIC gives a mechanism where a scheduled parent job can call a scheduled child job through REST API, and doing so, the child schedule gets triggered immediately, and then it can go and pick up the file. The other pattern, the decoupling the business object from scheduler, is extensively used in the ERP and SCM world as well. This is like, as you can imagine, scheduled jobs are sequential in nature. So when one schedule is running, the second schedule is not kicked off until the first scheduled job finishes. So it's a singleton in a way. But a lot of customers say, okay, when I picked up my schedule, when one schedule runs, I picked up 5 files. I would like to run, and let's say, 5 more files was dumped. You would like to pick up those 5 more files. The way we ask you to implement this is the parent schedule job, consumes the files and hands over to a child process, which is more REST-based, and you trigger the child job. And it's a one-way fire and forget, so that the scheduled job gets released back so it can go and pick up the other files. So if you want to increase the concurrency of the files to be consumed, you would probably implement this pattern. I want to briefly touch upon integration with non-Fusion application. This session was mainly focused, like I said, covering the integration scenarios and best practices for Fusion. But I'm going to briefly touch about, because I just call out 3 applications here, but there are many more non-Fusion applications. So EPM is one of the non-Fusion applications. So if you want to do integration, EPM has a direct integration with ERP. If you really want to do integration with EPM provides something called EPM integration agents. It's a non-OIC solution. EPM also has REST APIs, but in the scenarios, what we have seen is EPM is very tightly integrated with ERP. You really don't need to do anything extra. But if you still have outlier integrations, you can use OIC. Warehouse management system is another common application, non-Fusion application, where we have come across. Warehouse management system does provide some pre-built integrations to integrate into inventory. You can go to Oracle Marketplace or support MOS to download some of these integrations. And again, you can use OIC along with the WMS REST APIs for outlier integrations. OTM, Oracle Transport Management, is one of the non-Fusion app. Again, OTM exposes REST APIs. It has market-built, pre-built integrations between OTM and WMS. And OIC can again be used for outlier integrations if needed. So few best practices to call out. I already mentioned when you're thinking about design, think about real-time versus batch. The BIP usage, use BIP only when there are standard APIs not available. Sync versus async. This is again a very common thing. What I would encourage everyone to do during the design phase to think about whether you want to design synchronous integration versus asynchronous. Security, use JOT tokens to connect to Fusion. Refrain from using basic auth or system users. Large response data, think about using pagination in Fusion REST APIs. Reduce multiple calls to REST APIs on Fusion. You can use bat action on Fusion REST APIs. The middleware database, we talked about this. This is an OK pattern. You feel free to use it as necessary. REST over chose, prefer REST or always over SOAP. This is one other thing, what I've seen with few customers, offload high processing to a more cloud native solution. I don't have a pattern for this. Maybe the next time we present, we could have a pattern for this. Think about if you're getting one of the customer had the scenario of this huge file coming in, and they had to split this file based on subledger IDs, right? Can you do it in OIC? Well, you can, but it becomes too complex in OIC because OIC is more a drag and drop kind of a tool which has a lot of capabilities. But then if you needed very high processing, where processing intensive, I would probably call a more like an OKE or a microservice hosted on Oracle Cloud or a function hosted on Oracle Cloud and offload that high processing to this microservice or a function and return the response back to OIC. And the last one is a file exchange. Use OIC SFTP server or Fusion UCM as necessary. The last part, what I want to cover is the extension pattern. So we covered extensively the integration patterns. Now we are going into the extension patterns. At a very high level, right? It's a classic 3-tier architecture. So for the app tier, you have you could use VBCS, and that's probably the most extensively used. I've never seen customers use Oracle Jet or Apex, but theoretically speaking, you can still use it, right? In the mid tier, you can have something like OIC, OKE, or Oracle Functions, or even good old WLSC, which was previously JCS, right? And the application tier, you have pretty much the Fusion, right? So what are the patterns here, right? One of the common patterns what we have seen is you can build applications on VBCS, and you can, for routing, transformation, and fetching data, you can use OIC, and OIC in turn would call ERP and SCM. So the pros of it is, OIC is Oracle managed, it is low code, but the approach seems to have a little bit higher latency, especially if you have especially dealing with VBCS, you want the response time of the pages to be, sub-seconds. So you may want to, think twice or opt for other solutions if your performance requirement is very stringent. It's best suited for file uploads and asynchronous based UI interaction. For synchronous, you would probably want to think about other approaches. The second pattern is VBCS calling SAS directly. So this is again low code. You don't need to maintain a middle tier. You can have VBCS call the Fusion APIs directly. But the problem with this approach is the business logic gets in the front end. So your VBCS JavaScripting becomes very, very heavy. It's not ideal in cases where you have a lot of business logic, right? The third pattern, and we have been seeing this more commonly adopted in the field, that is VBCS calling a microservice hosted on Oracle Cloud, and then which is calling SAS. This does provide a very low latency architecture, but the cons is you will have to code it. So you will have to use any of the coding languages to stand up that microservice. The fourth option here is VBCS calling functions, calling SAS. the good thing is, you don't have to, it is serverless. You don't have to really think about having a service hosted on a compute or anything. Everything is taken for you, and you are, built for only the uptime of the function. The only negative side of this is the cold starts what you have with functions. So, when the function is initially called, I believe it takes time to load up the function for the first time. But if you have a very high volume transaction coming in, that, if you're making sure that every minute or every 5 minutes you have at least one transaction coming in, this approach can definitely work fine for you. And the last option is VBC is calling WLSC, which was previously JCS. I've not seen customers use this pattern, but I want to call it out that you can still use it for any reason. If you had a scenario where you had already invested in JCS and you had code written in there, you could probably have WLSC as a migration path forward. I've put some links here. There are some blog posts which have been written by A-Team.
So thank you very much, Neil, for the excellent update on the August release, including the 2 new adapters for Zendesk and SAP. Thank you, Ape, for the nice reference architecture to integrate and extend SaaS with the patterns. So that's very useful. For further integration resources, please visit our Oracle integration website. Make use of the documentation and the Oracle Video Hub. Today's webcast is recorded and we will publish the video and the presentation at the Oracle Video Hub. Please visit the A-Team blog for more information and the Oracle Integration Team blog. I highly recommend to take a look at the A-Team articles as they constantly share best practices. To keep updated and for the latest information, please subscribe to the integration newsletter. And if you would like to try Oracle integration, it's part of the free trial at oracle.com/tryit. With that, I would like to come to the questions and answers. Neil, there's a question for you regarding the pricing for Oracle integration and what the minimum pricing is and how do we charge?
Okay, so Oracle integration pricing is based on usage. We have this concept of message packs, and a message pack equates to 5,000 messages per hour. So you can think of up to 5,000 orders going through your system, through your OIC instance in 1 hour. That would be one message pack. So we can go from one message pack to, to an awful lot more, up to 500,000 messages flowing through the system in 1 hour, and you pay accordingly. The best thing to do is actually just check out the pricing on cloud.oracle.com. You can select integration and then you can come directly to the pricing for that. Now we'll add that to the list of resources for this webcast as well, so that everybody has that link to the pricing. There was another question there that I said that I'd answer, was to do with integration with Micros. Now the question, Micros there's 2 aspects to it. There's Oracle Hospitality, where we have done many integrations with Oracle Hospitality. They're on my blog, and we are working on an Oracle Hospitality adapter for OIC. But of course, there can be integration scenarios with Micros Symphony, which will be the point of sale system as well. So for those people who are interested in that, if you just get an email off to me, and we can discuss what we can do for you there as well.
Yeah, before you answer that one, Neil, there's one question that I want to, by Diego. And what's the workaround for files larger than 1 gig?
Yeah.
I want to have that. So, Abhay, let's address that question now.
So, as I mentioned, so is it how do we address the files larger than 1 gig?
That's the question, yeah.
So generally what we have, 1 gig is a huge amount of data. So if you're generating, we have seen customers who do like quarterly close will get some, financial data which could exceed that. But, the way this has been implemented is you could, run the reporting twice to make it like, maybe 500 meg or, less than 1 gig. So that's pretty much you could do. Like I said, it's very, very, an outlier scenario where you would have a data greater than 1 gig, because 1 gig is a lot of data, especially if you're talking about flat files. That is a ton of data.
The other aspect is, if you're generating data sets greater than 1 gig on a regular basis, and you want that to go through OIC, there's two things. You can chunk the data outside of OIC to reduce the file size. Let's say you've got a 5 gig file, we'll reduce it into 5 1 gig files. But I would be questioning whether you should be using OIC to be doing such large processing. That's more in the data ODI space, maybe sometimes in the MFT space. But if you're doing large transformations with such large files, we should be really questioning whether OIC is the right tool for this.
So if you have further questions, you can post them anytime at Cloud Customer Connect, and you find the link in the chat. Excellent. Thank you, Deepak and Ape, for the excellent presentation. Thank you, Neil, and thank you the whole team for answering the questions and answers, Ravi, and everybody for attending today's webcast. And we are looking forward to welcome you at our next integration webcast on December 16th. Thanks for attending, and thanks for using Oracle Integration.